Jenny Klochko, and you're watching my podcast, the platform for guest stories beyond your daily newsfeed. 2 billion, about 2 billion American dollars Russia spends on propaganda. Seems a lot, but how much do you think Russia spends on bribing politicians in different countries? Do you think it's possible to find out? I doubt so, but however, we're starting the series of interviews about Russian money in British politics. Yes, I know it's a long tradition, probably the method and tools the same, more or less. The names changing. And the series of interviews was inspired by Nathan Gill. Nathan Gill recently, he admitted he took the money from Russian to push Russian narratives from Ukrainian politicians while he was the EU Member of Parliament. So today we will cover the Ukrainian aspect, because Nathan Gill, he was taking money from Ukrainian MP Oleg Voloshin, a man once described by the US government as a pawn of Russian Secret Service, and made speeches in the parliament, statements to a TV channel, and arranged an event with a pro-Russian politician. Gill will be sentenced in November, and his defense barrister said he expected to be jailed. So the Old Bailey was told that he was tasked by Ukrainian MP Oleg Voloshin on at least 8 occasions to make specific statements in return for money, and there was evidence of WhatsApp messages between two men. So who is Mr. Voloshin? Who is Mr. Medvedchuk? And this sort of Ukrainian aspect of Russian money in the British politics we will discuss today with my guest. It's Dmytro Zolotukhin, ex-Deputy Minister of Information Policy of Ukraine, founder of the Institute for Post-Information Society, founder of OSINT Academy, InfoWars practitioner. Hello, how are you today?
Thank you for having me, Jenny. I'm good.
So let's start with your thoughts when you found out that Nathan Gill admitted he took the money to push Russian narratives. What were your thoughts?
This is very unexpected event because in certain way this is an escalation of the situation because the last several years very many people were very well informed about what is happening, and in Ukraine that was very visible how European MPs and how politically exposed person they cooperate with Viktor Medvedchuk, who is there is no exact word for cum in English. Vladimir Putin is a godfather for Medvedchuk's daughter. So this is a family, and still there is a very huge connection between them, despite of the fact that Medvedchuk personally has failed Putin in understanding of Ukraine when Putin planned his full-scale invasion in 2022. So Medvedchuk has failed all the projects that were directed onto Ukraine to manipulate people's minds and manipulate the political agenda, and still Putin supports him in full because he's a family. And people in Europe who cooperated with Medvedchuk were fully aware about who is that and how he's shaping Ukrainian politics, how he's shaping the international politics. And very many people in Ukraine and outside of Ukraine and the West, they were aware about what Medvedchuk is doing and what those people who cooperate with him are doing on behalf of their constituencies. I don't know, that can be the members of parliament, that can be politicians. So everybody knew what was happening. And now in 2025, we have this not only the conviction, not only the position of the government of the Great Britain, but also the position of Nathan Gill, who decided, I think that can be certain agreement between him and the government, or well, certain motivation that he would make his thought about making the proactive position, not defending himself, of course, defending, but making an agreement and admitting what he did before. But for me, this is very unusual, unexpected, and I think that that can be a sign of some more broad geopolitical context and events and continuation of the situation we are in. Maybe this is a signal that some parts of the Western elites they awakening at last and doing some actions, making some political steps, and this is one of them. And I sincerely hope that this is not the last one. This is only the beginning, because there's a huge amount of information to discover, and maybe that can be even harmful for some of political exposed persons who we trusted before, who we worked with, and so on and so forth, because the Russian network of influence and contacts is very broad. People never thought that this is something bad to cooperate with Russian money in Russian politics, because, well, all countries do this, and this is totally okay. And this is why, once again, the event and the situation around Nathan Hill is very unusual for me, and hopefully that will be only first one step on the long way.
Nathan Gill is not something big. He's not big fish of British politics. But why do you think he was needed for this chain? And what's the role of Oleg Voloshin? Because we will get back to Viktor Medvedchuk. His history of dark doings very long, and he's a very controversial person. But Oleg Voloshin, what's his role? A part of indication that he might be the asset of Russian secret services.
This is a very long story. It's like the Game of Thrones from, or I don't know, the Netflix story. So I think that our viewers can take a cup of coffee for this, but I will try to be very short. Viktor Medvedchuk, we have to start from the Viktor Medvedchuk, because he is the key person, and Voloshin was only one of his advisors, or one of his people who cooperated with him, because Medvedchuk is number one, as I said, the Putin's family member, and everything was done according to his orders. So not going too long ago back in times, in 2013, before the Revolution of Dignity in Ukraine, Viktor Medvedchuk and his partners, including Oleg Voloshin, they were working on the promotion of the movement that called Ukrainian Choice. Ukrainian Choice is the political platform not formed yet as a political party. It was a movement, but with very huge media coverage in Ukraine, who promoted the agenda that Ukraine should refuse from the EU association agreement, not joining European Union, because European Union has its, decaying values together with these gay issues and, all these Russian homophobic trends that were discovered here in Ukraine. And when the Revolution of Dignity started, and the 3 months of this country, Medvedchuk was one of those who created and launched very many projects in media, openly and covertly, on the cover, to ruin the Revolution of Dignity, to ruin the movement of people. And after the war has started on March 1st, 2014, after the annexation of Crimea, Medvedchuk has formed his own opposition, and Voloshin was part of this opposition. They were both very active in social media, and Voloshin represented this view of certain part of Ukrainians. Of course, some of those were on the east of the country, representing the view that Revolution of Dignity was the Western influence issue, Western influence event, and we have to stick to Russian Federation and to understand the Russian position on Crimea, on Donbass, on what is happening in Ukraine, and so on and so forth. Unfortunately, in 2019, when we had the two elections. Actually, this should be underlined that during the wartime, since March 1st, 2014, since the annexation of Crimea, that was the war ongoing on the Ukrainian land. Ukraine had 4 elections. 4. I mean, like people who saying that Ukraine is not a democratic country. During the war, we had 4 elections: 2 presidential and 2 parliamentary. And in 2019, Oleg Voloshin and Viktor Medvedchuk, they become the members of Ukrainian parliament and started to promote their agenda already officially. Before this, there was a huge, in this period between 2014 and 2019, there was a huge work paid by the Russian money in Ukraine and outside of Ukraine. And here, where we have this connection with Nathan Hill and different their European partners. The secret is that Ukraine still very concentrated on the let me put it this in the right way, on the understanding that we have to look good for Europeans, because we are directing, we are going to the West, we are trying to be the representative of the Western values, we are trying to be the representative of the European values, and we have to look good. And usually when members of parliament or any kind of activists, they say that we have to launch certain reform or to make certain decisions, maybe they would be not very popular, they always argue that we have to do this because our European partners demand this from us. And this is, for me, is a very strange logic and motivation for doing something, because European partners demanded something from us. But because of this instance, because of this motivation of the Western support, Russian influencers in Ukraine, they needed European voices to say that, you see, this is grown-ups. They are living in Great Britain. They are living in Brussels. They are working in European politics. And these grown-ups, they're saying to you how to act correctly and how to act in another way. So in a certain moment, Medvedchuk and his partners and Oleg Voloshin and Vadim Rabinovich, who fled to Israel before the full-scale invasion in 2022, they started to look for these European Western representatives, for these, like, grown-ups, to tell Ukrainians that you're doing wrong and you have to stick to Russian Federation, and so on and so forth. And they have found them. They launched a campaign of roundtables in Ukraine and in European countries. They created roundtables, I guess, in Paris, in Berlin. I don't know about London, but so that was the European capital. And Nathan Gill, Maximilian Kra, the German guy, also the member of European Parliament, a couple of other members of European Parliament, they participated in these roundtables, talking about Russian-Ukrainian relations and the position of Europe about these relations. And Voloshin was one of the organizers and moderators of this process, because Medvedchuk had his strategic understanding and strategic view of what should be done and how to arrange this process, sending a message to Ukrainians and to Europeans with these some of the European political leaders as Nathan Gill. And Voloshin was his partner who did the operative management, managed this process together with media coverage. We also have to state that Voloshin started his career, well, not started the career, but he worked as a Ukrainian diplomat in Moscow. I guess that during this period, he was recruited by FSB or any other Russian intelligence body. Then he worked in the press office of Ukrainian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and then he promoted himself as the activist, the politician in Ukraine. One very interesting piece of information: his name and his email is being mentioned in the documents of Ministry of Justice of the United States. You can Google this information in the internet. it was revealed when they worked on the Manafort case. Manafort, former advisor to candidate to President Donald Trump in 2016, who was also convicted in conspiracy. And back in times, Voloshin also cooperated with people who were close to Manafort, like Kilimnik. This is a very complicated issue. I don't want to exaggerate the time, but you can Google Voloshin's email in these documents and connect the dots to see how Voloshin was integrated in all the processes that were connected to the Russian intelligence activity in Ukraine. And unfortunately, Mr. Manafort worked. I wouldn't say that that was kind of intelligence work. That was work of the political technology, and the task of Manafort was to provide Ukrainian oligarchs and politicians with his knowledge in political technologies and PR. And Kilimnik and Voloshin, they facilitated this process, helped him to publish certain articles in Ukrainian media. I remember there was the discussion about the article in Kiev Post, which was one of the very important English language media in Ukraine, and so on. So Voloshin's story is very connected with Medvedchuk's story and the Russian intelligence influence story in Ukraine, and he is not the front view person. I wouldn't say that Voloshin is the main character of this stage, but he is very important. And I agree that Nathan Hill is not so important person as some popular politicians, but his participation and participation of other deputies and members of parliament, this is very significant for our understanding how Russian propaganda machine, how Russian machine works, and how many people in European countries not being aware about this, not being aware about the full picture, continuing to think, okay, this is soft power, all countries do this, and all countries, they find some supporters to participate in conferences, roundtables, whatever, and so on and so forth. I agree totally that everyone does it, and we have to understand that Russian propaganda and Russian intelligence, they never invented something new, something unique. They just continue to repeat what is working. And unfortunately, these discussions, they are working in European Union. And I remember my participation in roundtables and saying, arguing with my European colleagues when they were saying that, okay, we have to continue to support the right of the citizen, the right of the person, even to lie, because this is the freedom of speech. If person wants to lie to you, this is your problem that you have to reveal this lie. But if person wants to lie to you, this is his or her right to do this, because this is constitutional right. Unfortunately, we still on the verge of understanding that we are in so-called ontological war, ontological warfare, because my position is that Russia is not only lying on industrial scale. This is their vision of reality. And our problem, in my humble opinion, is that we do not understand that this is the fight for survival. This is not just democratic discussion or multilateralism or pluralism of thinking. This is the conflict between the European platform of the vision of the world that says about human rights, that says about the dignity of each person, and Russian platform vision of the world that says about collectivism, that says about the imperialism in Russia, and the understanding that they are spreading that Ukraine should be under control of the Russian Federation. So I think that Nathan Gill's story, maybe not so, like a blockbuster of Hollywood for anyone, but this is a very interesting piece of the full picture of how this clash of civilizations, this clash is working, how technically Russians doing their job.
So if we look at the big picture, Nightingale is just a puppet in the big puppet show of Viktor Medvedchuk, and Oleg Voloshin is just doing some functions, some dirty work, or connecting people, but he's not sort of someone who mastermind or any kind of like, he's not even close to the role what Medvedchuk plays. Is that correct?
Yeah, in certain way, this is very technical. This is very managerial. There is no certain, holy grail in this work, because the intelligence work is usually very direct and repeatable. So they're doing the same things, and this is like the illustration of how it's working. So maybe I wouldn't say the word puppet, because I think that he understood what he's doing, but yes, he did it in favor of Viktor Medvedchuk.
Viktor Medvedchuk, it's very controversial sort of person in Ukrainian politics, and we could start from 80s, or his doings. How would you describe him concise and give the gist of the people who never heard or just find this name familiar to understand sort of what does he do? Is it the Moriarty of Ukrainian politics? Is it the person who is destined to fail wherever he does? Would you agree that he's someone who loves Ukraine in his own way, or he's just so driven by money and being rich and influential, and he's person who once wanted to be the president, and his wife was sort of like trying the title the first lady and all of that. I mean, at the end of Kuchma term, former Ukrainian president. So how would you describe him to give sort of the most concise description for people to understand his role?
For me personally, I wouldn't use any words to praise his ability, because in my opinion, we have to understand two things about Medvedchuk. First is that he's a Soviet person. He's a person from Soviet Union. He has Soviet thinking, Soviet mindset, which says that there is certain power, the government power or power of people who were given this power. I don't know by whom, like by God or by Communist Party, and you have to oblige. You have to understand that this power, and you cannot do anything. So this is kind of Soviet thinking, and he has this Soviet mindset. And second thing is that because he didn't have any unique abilities, unique talents, he created his image as a person who make deals, who can promote certain manipulations, who can get what he wanted without any kind of talents, without actually delivery. So when he said that I can make an agreement with Vladimir Putin about gas, for example, about delivery of gas, he was right, because he was able to convince everyone that he is very talented, that he is very skillful. That was not the truth. The truth is that because he never had these talents, he created his skillful parts, his abilities in the sphere of manipulating people. And this manipulation, I heard the the audio records of his telephone calls with the Russian side and with his Ukrainian partners. That was revealed by SBU. There was a huge scandal in 2019, 2020, after Zelensky came to power, after Sluga Narodu Party wins, after the change of power in Ukraine in 2019. If you listen to these audios, how he's speaking, how Medvedchuk is trying to convince people, this is exaggeration, this is manipulation, this is trying to convince people that he has everything under control. So he's a seller of air in a certain way. He was selling something he never had, Because Putin was a godfather to his child, he always used this affiliation with the power and saying that I can get anything I want, and you have to pay me, you have to make me your number one person, you have to elect me, you have to comply with me, and so on, so forth. So two things: Soviet mindset and this ability to manipulate other people, because he never had any talent. And in proof of this, to prove it, if you follow any projects that he launched in 2005, I guess, that was the political movement Netak, which says it was the slogan of the orange, I mean the Yushchenko's party, another former president of Ukraine, was tak, yes. So that was the slogan of the political movement, of the political party, that was yes. And he launched, Medvedchuk has launched the political project Netak, not so, not yet. So, and he gathered some people around him, and that was a total failure. They spent a hell of a money on the promotion of this political movement. That was 2005. Then in 2012, he launched this Ukrainian choice political movement, how to break the decision of Yanukovych also and other political elites to join European Union and to follow European integration and to sign the European Union Association Agreement in 2015. So that was the purpose of the party, and the purpose of Medvedchuk's movement, Ukrainian choice. That was also total failure, absolutely total failure, because they spent millions and billions, because all Ukraine, all the regions of Ukraine, you can imagine this is thousands of kilometers well, hundreds of kilometers, but thousands of kilometers when you go from the east to the west. And each kilometer you see the big board with the political ads of Medvedchuk Ukrainian choice. So huge amount of money, total failure. And then in 2019, when he launched, and before when he launched these political roundtables and political movements, yes, he already managed to get to the parliament. He became a member of parliament, but his work dedicated to provide Putin with an influence in Ukraine, with information about what Ukrainians thinking, was total failure. Because when the US guys and the Great Britain guys said that, well, you have only 3 days before Kiev falls under the Russian army feet, that was also the failure. And that was the failure that Medvedchuk manufactured with his own hands. Because Medvedchuk was the person who Putin followed and understood that he has everything under control, and now Ukraine is weak, and now we can already launch the full-scale invasion. So we have to understand that all Medvedchuk's life is the story of continuous failures, and I wouldn't say that he's kind of, ruling puppets and he's a great mind. He's just a poor Soviet guy who managed to find a way how to manipulate other people. And unfortunately, this had to be said to send the message to Britons and to Europeans that people like Nathan Gill, they unfortunately even more poor than Medvedchuk, because Medvedchuk was not the kind of devil and mastermind. It says that people like Nathan Gill, they were not able to get money and to get pride and to get popularity in any other way but taking money, but taking finances from such poor person like Viktor Medvedchuk, unfortunately.
So Medvedchuk driven by money or driven by desire of power?
I don't think that this is different things. You get money, you convert it in power. You get power from Putin, you convert it in money. Okay. Yeah, well, there was very, very dirty rumors about. Well, let me skip on this. But I don't know. I don't want to speculate in your podcast.
Okay, so but Viktor Medvedchuk is not the only one who was sitting or thriving on Russian money, and penetration of Russian investments, let's call it like that, in Ukrainian politics been since Ukraine got independence, isn't it? And there were known facts when the ministers in the government different years were holders of Russian passport, were serving, and particularly there were cases with the Secret Service and Defense Ministry. And you can I don't know, would you agree? But there were sort of like certain steps or the strategy to destroy Ukrainian armed forces and all of that, which has to be built almost from the ground in 2014 after the annexation of Crimea and the invasion to the east of Ukraine. What's your take on that aspect of influence of Russian money in Ukrainian politics?
Well, this is a very long story. I just don't want to go in philosophical and historical discussion. To be short, well, everything gets me back to the idea of this ontological clash between the understanding of reality by different people. Because lately we launched in the discussion inside Ukraine, and for me, this is that was very important and still is very important. Ukrainian journalist, the award winner Miroslava Barchuk, she's running the cycle of her documentaries on Ukrainian public broadcasters, Suspilne, and one of her films, the last film, was about the history of how Ukrainians invented Russian Empire. Actually, that was Ukrainians who created the mindset of Peter the First to run Moscovia. Before Peter the First, there was no any Russia. There was Kiev and Rus. There was the Russian lands, but there was no any Russia. When Peter the First conquered Karl XII, the Swedish king, when he won Poltava battle. After this, Ukrainian intellectuals, they had to comply with the force, and they went to serve to Peter the First. And one of them, Feofan Prokopovich, who was the professor of Kiev Mogila Academy, one of the first universities in this territory, in this part of the world, he went to serve to Peter the First as the political advisor. And actually, Feofan Prokopovich and his colleagues from Mogila, from Kiev Academy, they coined the Russian Empire. They created this logic. And these tensions between Moscow and Kiev, this is in certain way some psychological perversion of battling for the heartland, battling for the heart of understanding who we are and where we're coming from. Because Russian Empire cannot ever exist without Kiev. This is impossible that independent Ukraine and Russian Federation as it is now coexist together on the planet. This is impossible because Russian Empire cannot survive without controlling Kiev, because Kiev was the heart of the lands that that rose these people, these nations, and this logic of this ontological thinking. And Kiev was the European city always. That it appeared as the European city. It appeared in European logic, and these landed this space, not only Ukrainian but even part of the Russia as we know it now. This is European space. This is space of the European vision of the reality, European vision of the world. However, this change when Peter the First and Ukrainian intellectuals created the platform that Russia can exist as an empire, that it can be, there are very many historical precautions of this process, then they have started this competition, and that it was never an honest competition. That was a competition when Moscow had to stress and to erase Kiev from, at least from minds and from memory, to say that there was only Moscow, there was only Russia, there was only Russian ethnic nation, and so on and so forth. So that was more like a psychological aspect of how Russian empire, Russian country can exist. If Russia will leave Ukraine independent, subjective, I mean, if Ukraine will have the possibility to make its own decisions, then Russian Empire just cannot exist anymore, because that will say that all the other lands inside Russian Federation now, like Chechnya, Dagestan, Tatarstan, Yakutia, not going further even than Belarus. Belarus can exist absolutely separately from Moscow. In that case, if Ukraine is independent, if Belarus can be independent, then Russian Empire just cannot exist anymore. This is not civilization. This is just another country like all other countries. And this reason, this platform, it's the core understanding of why Putin, or anyone except of Putin, I think that this is a huge mistake by Westerners to think that if Putin was dead, when he dies, everything will change. Nothing will change, because this is not about Putin. This is not about personalities. Any other person on his position, if the Tsarism, if the imperialism will be followed as the Russian platform of existence, the war with Ukraine will never end. Ukraine, independent Ukraine, and Russian Empire cannot coexist on the planet. Only Ukraine, independent Ukraine, and Russian Federation in the understanding of the federation, when people has their rights, when regions has their rights, and when the Senate and the Parliament can refuse from the proposal of president to use the army and to use the force against another nation. When this decision is not making by Tsar, but this decision can be made by the nation. This is all these tensions like Crimea and Donbass. This is only the the results of this thinking, but in core, this is this clash of the civilizational understanding.
But if we look at the past 30 years, and especially tight connections and the money how much Russia invested in businesses, the tight connection between the oligarchs and Ukrainian and Russian. And it's quite interesting aspect of this full-scale invasion also, because one of prominent oligarchs who was sort of defending Ukraine and Dnipro just in prison right now, who it was claimed that he had tight connections with President Zelensky. Two, Akhmetov and Pinchuk trying to prove who is bigger patriot of Ukraine right now through different charities. Some escape or keeping their quiet. So how about if we look at this side, do you think this role of oligarchs and their money and their influence through media, through YouTube channels, I mean by media, TV channels, because almost all TV channels were owned by oligarchs in Ukraine, isn't it? So how do you think that was sort of reshaping Ukrainian politics in modern times?
Well, first of all, it is all about huge money, and huge money are being owned by Russia in first place, because due to the size and due to the oil capacity, Russia could always allow to itself to use this money to buy something in Ukraine, to make the influence, and all Ukrainian oligarchs, they had business in Russian Federation. Absolutely, each one of them. And if you will drill down in certain stories, even after the Revolution of Dignity and during the Revolution of Dignity of 2013, 2014, you would be very surprised about how people acted and who visited Kremlin among Ukrainian oligarchs, and now saying that he is the most pro-Ukrainian among everyone. 90% of oil refinery industry was under control of Russia in Ukraine. Very big amount of industrial complex was under control. A very big amount of used as a platform to to corrupt local politicians and to do very good business, because In Russia, this is impossible because in Russia, everything is vertically integrated. Everything belongs to Putin sooner or later, and everything belongs to FSB. Ukraine as a democratic country and any other European country, this is very flexible instrument how you can corrupt some politicians or some decision makers. And actually Nord Stream 2 and Nord Streams, this is the huge example of how it works, because this is huge money, this is huge incomes, and no one like Putin knows how to do this. Taking in consideration his experience in St. Petersburg when he was the advisor to Mayor Sobchak. And because of this huge amount of money, and because of the democratic, flexible system that allows this money to infiltrate inside the country, inside the businesses, that became very possible. So when we start to dig stories about Medvedchuk, about his activities, about political influence, about the stories that were launched in 2014 in Ukraine about the federalization of Ukraine. This is another story that also belonged to Medvedchuk, because Medvedchuk was the promoter of the idea of the federalization of Ukraine. And federal idea is, this is another democratic position, how we can talk about the future of the country. Let's make Ukraine federalized. So Odessa and Kharkiv and Kiev, they had their own budgets and things, and so on and so forth. If you take any story, there will be Russian money inside of this, any kind of conflicts. In the last 2 years, we had a project, open source intelligence investigations from behalf of our non-governmental organization, as you mentioned, Institute for Post-Information Society. And I have published the biggest dossier on Volodymyr Sivkovich, biggest dossier in Ukraine. Volodymyr Sivkovich, this is another Russian agent like Medvedchuk, but I think he was even more powerful, because Volodymyr Sivkovich was the vice prime minister of Ukraine, and then he was the deputy secretary of the National Security and Defense Council. He controlled several aviation companies. He had very many people, very many friends in, and actually he started his career in Soviet KGB. He worked in KGB. He worked in Eastern Germany as a KGB officer. And Volodymyr Sivkovich was a huge competitor and rival to Andrei Portnov, who was killed in Spain not so far ago. They were enemies, Portnov and Sivkovich. And sometimes, surprisingly, you see that some political and media clashes in Ukraine till the full-scale invasion, that was the clashes between Sivkovich and Portnov. However, both of them were outside of Ukraine. That was absolutely crazy. When you do the investigation, when you see how they influence on the processes in Ukraine, this is being done by huge money and by the understanding that democratic state, democratic society sometimes doesn't have any means how to defend itself, because this is not prohibited by law. This is, well, anyone can fund the finance media, anyone can promote his own agenda, anyone, and so on and so forth. Not talking about these disinformation processes and so on. So unfortunately, money, they conquers everything, like the old Ukrainian proverb, "Бабло побеждает зло," which says money conquers evil. So yes, this is a very interesting mix of how management and financial resource can influence the country. But I continue, underline and I continue to repeat that this is secondary issue. This is a tool, and primary issue and the logic and motivation is this ontological clash between Moscow and Kiev, and Moscow could earn huge money by operating Crimea without any clashes, without war. So I think, in my opinion, if Putin did nothing in 2014, if he waited, if he if he used his old style KGB issues without launching warfare, if he wouldn't made a decision in March 2014 that he needs to answer to Americans by using military force, I think that Russia could get much more results in Ukraine by using money, by using the weaknesses of democracy. But Putin decided to use military force in 2014 and then in 2022. And that was another failure. And both failures were manufactured by Viktor Medvedchuk, because Viktor Medvedchuk was one of the closest persons to Putin while making decisions on Ukraine.
So right now, the main from my perspective, the main narratives about Ukrainian political life from Kremlin, it's the illegitimate president and inability to make own decisions, always relying on White House or the EU leaders. That's what Kremlin say. Would you add some other these narratives which come in from Russian side in terms of Ukrainian political life or political power in Ukraine?
My take on this is absolutely irrelevant. I've seen the speech of one of the experts on the latest Riga conference, and he said that we concentrate our attention too much on what Moscow says, what Putin wants, and how they acting. That put us in a secondary position when we think what our adversary will do, and we are not thinking about our own development. For me, this is very crucial and very sensitive issue, because I'm trying to change the mindset that is now in Ukraine and in Europe, that we always have to think what Putin does, what Putin wants. For the last 12 months, I'm researching the high-profile strategic documents that were published in Moscow and in Beijing. In Beijing, you know that they are publishing these global initiatives. On September 8th this year, they published this global governance initiative. This is already fourth or fifth document like this. In 2022, in April, that was the global initiative of security. Xi Jinping promoted his own vision of how world should be shaped. Moscow tries to do the same. They try to promote the documents where they explain who are Russians, what they want, how they live, what is their mindset, what is their core, what is, well, this is like the codex, the code of Putinism builder. You know, when in Soviet times where there was a code of communists, code of the builder of communism. So now it's like a code of builder of Putinism. In my opinion, these documents, they are very similar. So what I see now, that Moscow trying to cosplay Beijing in certain way. So they're trying to promote the same ideas about global majority, about this multilateralism in Chinese vision, and so on and so forth. So politically, Putin can, to announce something. For example, his latest speech on Valdai, Vladimir Putin had 4 hours speech at Valdai Forum. First his notes, and then the answering the questions. And in his remarks, he was saying about clash of civilizations, like in the words of Western philosophers who published and wrote about this clash of civilization. But if you follow both trends, like Chinese documents and Russian documents, you can see very many similarities in there. So politically, Putin can say that Russia was fooled by the Westerners and by the Western political leaders, because Russia wanted to join NATO and they never allowed Russia to join NATO. Then Russia wanted the continent, to unite the continent from Lisbon to Vladivostok, there was a trend of the unification of these processes. And Putin always saying this resentment trend, psychological rhetorics saying that we were fooled, we were trying to be good to the West, and the West has fooled us. The West never accepted us, and this is why we became, angry, and we started to conflict with the West. So this is what he politically says, but economically and overally, if you follow both ways, like Chinese documents of kind of propaganda documents, because this global governance initiative, global security initiative, this is more the ontological vision of Xi Jinping, how he wants to shape the world. If you follow both trends, you can have very many similarities in there, which says that Russia cannot survive now without China. So this is unfortunately, maybe this is not conscious decisions, but Russia already is a part of Chinese ecosystem of understanding of reality. And what the discussion that was in American media after Donald Trump was elected, that they were trying to continue a so-called reversed Kissinger initiative or reversed Nixon, when Kissinger, advisor of President Nixon, tried to convince China to not to support the Soviet Union. And this is how they wanted to weaken the Soviet Union. And they were trying to be friends with China, to withdraw China from the, from cooperation with Soviet Union. So when Trump was elected, there was the discussion that now Americans do the reversed Kissinger. So now they're trying to withdraw Russian Federation from China and try to do that to weaken China. They have to be good to Putin and to Russian Federation. In my opinion, this is totally not working prospect, not working platform. This is an illusion that you can handle something like this, because if you follow the documents, the top high-level propaganda documents that are being created by experts like Karaganov, Kharichev, Kiriyenko, you can see that these documents absolutely follows the vision of reality that constructed in Beijing. So this is really a clash of civilization, and Putin writes about this. He writes about this. He is just like have his own his own perverted vision, but they just do not have any other choice. They have to stick to China because they're not. They understand that they will not be successful in war, because the war can last for another 10 years. And of course, it doesn't matter what happens with Ukraine, but Russia will fall if they will continue doing like this. And this is another point of view that I would like to deliver to Westerners, to Brits, thinking that it's happening with you or without you. It's already going. It's the global processes. And thinking about, maybe we can make a deal with Putin, maybe we can press Putin, maybe we can put a sanction on Putin. The processes are already going. Vladimir Putin tied Russia with China, and it doesn't matter what you do. So now the process is already going. The only way how to think about the best way how to compete with this situation is united greater Europe, with all these certain cognitive preferences, psychological preference in terms of defending those values that we share about the human rights, about the vision of development of the mankind, about the resources that we can spend to fight with evil, and use them to return to the basic position when Kiev and Rus, that was European empire on this land. So Ukraine is the successor of huge European empire, Kiev and Rus, and Moscow is just a mistake of history. mistake of Ukrainians who thought that you can build empire not from Kiev but from Moscow with Peter I because he has conquered Karl XII, the Swedish king. So this is just a geopolitical historical mistake. And what we can do is to close this mistake by returning to European understanding of this space. What we're trying to do, to exchange our opinions with Europeans, with Brits, and to use these cases, like case with Nathan Gill, to understand that this is supernatural. This is not a politics. This is not even an intelligence. This is just lousy people who want to earn their money and they are eager to manipulate all others. And we now spending our time that we could spend for efforts of making something good, like solving some real problems of the mankind, like fight with hunger, fight with diseases, fight with poverty. We're spending this valuable time to talk about some very dirty and lousy people like Viktor Medvedchuk. For me, this pisses me off hugely. And like you said, Nathan Gill is not someone significant, but we have to, to drill down, to understand what he's doing, to understand where it comes from. And we're spending our valuable time for things that not significant for us. This is not this is not influence the processes that are going globally. So this is my take about this. We should not think about what Putin says, about what he wants. We have to concentrate on the issues, on the global processes, and how we, how we see ourselves. Whether we want to be leaders of those processes, or whether we want like just to follow the all things and not making our own decisions.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I found it very irritating, especially when it was visible, and I felt it. I moved to sort of here in 2011, and sort of like every report on Ukrainian TV, any issue, and the end, and Russia, blah blah blah, Russia, blah blah blah, and it's like, oh my goodness, how many references? It's just like, intoxicated. And the question I ask all my guests: why do you love Ukraine?
It's evolving. The answer on this question is evolving through years. When you start to understand this in youth, in your 16s, when you're 20, and when you are 45, this is absolutely different love. And I think this is absolutely comply with how people love each other. And in my age, I think that I would say that this is a huge respect to people who represent Ukraine. This is not like love as young love, as you're like very intense. You're like tearing your t-shirts and saying that this love is absolutely hysterical. Now it's like very calm understanding. This is a huge respect to people who make Ukraine, who are Ukrainians, who represent Ukraine, how they act and how they behave. And when you see these people, how they react on challenges, on air raids, on air attacks, you understand that no one in the world can do this. I mean, like literally no one in the world. Yes, we can say that very many nations were very heroic in war times, in conflicts, but this is the way how Ukrainians react on explosions, on tragedies, on when you see the coffee bar and cafe started to be open and work and serving coffee after the missile hit it, you understand that no one can act like this in the world.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for your insights into Ukrainian politics, history. I hope the viewers will understand better. If you think of some resources or maybe some books or anything who would like to make sense of Ukrainian politics, please send me and I'll just leave in the description of the video. Thank you very much. It's been very interesting.
Thank you.
there was Ukrainian perspective on Russian money and British politics. And you see, it's not just British politics. It's been roundtables in France and Germany, obviously Ukraine through and through, with this corruption. You ask me during lives and in your comments about Ukrainian corruption. And anyway, I'm looking at it, and I do want to cover this aspect. And we will, step by step. And this is one of these steps to look at the corruption and the consequences. And such dark figures like Viktor Medvedchuk, also there was mentioned such politician as Sivkovich. He's in Moscow right now as well. So I think these people probably need another episode or more conversation on it, because so many wrongdoings, so many indecent things they've done. And I think it would be interesting to look at the style, the methods, their signature moves, and so on and so forth. Anyway, let me know what do you think about this conversation. If you like it, you know what to do. And if you haven't subscribed, please do. It does really help. And share your thoughts in the comments. On one hand, it does help to promote the podcast channel. On the other hand, I love reading it. I love our communication, and sort of I do get the inspiration from your comments. You make me think of some unexpected angles of the issue or of the motion we discuss. So please do, if it's no big trouble for you. Thank you for watching. I'm Jenny Klochko, and if you really like my work, if you really like this podcast channel, please join membership on the podcast, and I really appreciate for your support, and hopefully will be more stories, more guests to your interest. Have a lovely day. Take care. Thank you for watching. Bye.